Now, welcome and thank you for being a part of this webinar from TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. This is a webinar on year-round stewardship practices. And we want to cover a lot of material with you on at the beginner level, the intermediate level, and the advanced next level on how you can incorporate and implement some year-round practices in your congregation. My name is Davey Gerhard, and I am honored to be the Executive Director of TENS. I've been with TENS for just over a year now, and what a year it's been, building it as we fly it, learning so much, and being a participant in this amazing worldwide network of folks. I am joined today by my fellow board member and very good friend, the very Reverend Matthew Woodward. And I wonder if you might like to say a couple things about you, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Matthew Woodward. I'm the Dean of Trinity Cathedral in Sacramento. And I'm really delighted to be here with Davey and able to talk about this subject, which is a subject that I'm actually exploring myself. And so I'm really glad to be here, like building the plane as we fly it too. But it's something that we're doing at the cathedral, is trying to move towards an all year round generosity-based idea of stewardship. I'm really excited about that. I've been here at the cathedral since last September. I moved in the middle of COVID. That was a bit crazy, yes, if any of you are wondering, but it's going well and I've been really wonderfully welcomed. And I also am English, you may know. I'm really delighted to see some members of the Church of England here with us as well, and people from back home. I've been in the Bay Area for 10 years though, where I was the rector of a parish, and now at the cathedral since September, and I'm excited to be with you.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks for partnering with me today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and that's going to begin our slideshow today and our content. So now we are all on the same page. Welcome. Let's talk a little bit about our learning objectives today. We hope that by the end of today's webinar, you will learn that stewardship and fundraising are separate things. Yes, they inform each other. They are often tied together, but they are not synonyms. We'd like you to understand, hopefully, that stewardship is a practice and that fundraising is just a part of the way that we share our gifts and steward all of creation. We're going to talk about growing generosity. This is a companion practice, or perhaps the cornerstone or foundational practice of stewardship. How we learn to be generous, how we communicate generously, and how we talk about generosity. It informs all the things that we do together in community. So we'll be talking about some things that you can do to grow generosity in your congregations. We're also going to talk about building out a calendar of stewardship-focused activities. So this is for the planning and practical folks among us, folks who want to learn, well, how do I do this year-round? We're going to go through some liturgical ways that you can emphasize our creation and our generosity, and some very practical tips on how you can incorporate it and institute it into all levels of your congregational ministry. So that is a little bit about what we'll be doing today. Again, as you have questions, please use the Q&A to type them in. We'll be stopping every few slides to ask them, ask your questions and answer them. So as you think about them, pop them in. Stewardship is separate from fundraising. And we really want to be clear about that. So if it's not fundraising, what is it? Stewardship is the way we create impact in our community. It's the way that we bring our resources of time, talent, and treasure, our people, our ideas, our shared wisdom, to do the work that, that we need to do in our world. It's how you do your ministry inside and outside the walls of the place where you're located. It's a way to think about all of our resources. It's our training and our learning. So we'll be going over some stewardship formation tasks, some things you can do in forums and coffee hours and education programs. It's our effort and our work product. We're stewards in our lives, not just at church. The way we raise our families, the way we engage the economy, in how we work in the world, how we study and learn in the world, how we participate with our neighbors. It's about our spending and our saving. There are great implications on how we think about our money in terms of how we feel abundant or sharing or generous about our resources. And so how we save our money, how we spend our money, how we give our money, how we invest our money, all of these have implications on our generosity and our stewardship. It's about our wisdom and our teaching. I like to remind us that when we talk about time, talent, and treasure, we are really talking about those seriously. Just because we're focused on the fundraising so often, we tend to sometimes lose sight of the time and the talent piece of that three-legged stool. And I want us to know that sharing our wisdom, our experiences, our stories are a part of the way that we engage this work of generosity together. And all of that's about relationship. This is about our Christian relationship, our friendship, and the way we engage each other. Impact in community is why we do what we do. It is the call that we have in our gospel call to change the world, to impact the world. And that is what our stewardship, our resources allow us to do. So one of the ways I want us to think about our work together today is about that impact or mission-driven work that our congregations engage with. Throughout the year, we'll find ways to report on the successes and challenges and changes in our programs. This is really important because the more we talk about our ministry and our impact in the community, the more people can engage with the idea of why they are participating in stewardship, what they are doing, what their gifts go to. I like to remind our stewardship committee and our vestries that we should always be thanking people for their gifts, not just after the campaign in the thank you note that we send out, but that money that comes in all year and the time and the talent that people give to the church is what enables us to do ministry and to engage our neighbors. So I want us to think about how we can always be highlighting our mission. And we should be learning how to measure our impact with real metrics. This is important because it helps us identify what our money is spent for, what our time goes for, what our talent goes for. So when we can talk about that, like some examples I have here on our screen, we fed 1,000 people so far this year. This is, if you put that in your bulletin, if you talk about that at announcement time, it helps people understand that they're not just funding an idea, they're funding impact in the community, mission. The more you can do that in terms of reporting throughout the year and in creating your campaigns, the more successful and happy I think your membership will be as they learn how to do this work together. Everything we've been given, everything we have built, everything we have is a tool for our stewardship. So these are a series of questions that I think individually we ask, or that we may help our congregation form and ask the question: how can the church use my expertise or my training? We often don't think about the skills that we develop in our lives through our education, through our own life experience, and see those as things we can also give to the church. Church doesn't just want our money or our participation or our love from each other. It needs our expertise, our connections, our networks, the things that we learn in our work, the things that we learn in raising our families, the things that we learn in school, This is what we need to share with the world. How can the church use my strength or my skills on a project? So when the church is undergoing something, if it's a big renovation campaign and you have sweat equity or materials, in-kind donations, it's not just about what can you contribute toward the effort in terms of your finances, but what can you do? Even committee participation in these projects is really important, and that's a part of our stewardship as well. Understanding this, teaching it, helping our flock understand that these are the ways they can give, can help us all understand better how we can participate in the system together. Is there something I can teach my congregation or my diocese? Could I volunteer for a workshop? As somebody who works in diocesan ministry, I can tell you that we love it when people volunteer to lead a class, a workshop, a training. It's work that that needs to be done, and it puts it into a different voice. So when you're asking yourself, what can I give my church? Maybe you can teach them something about what you do or how you approach life. Or maybe there's a workshop or a webinar or a brown bag series, a coffee hour, something you can do which will help your church increase its impact in mission. And of course, how can my finances help the church? And that's not just the money that you make in your pledge or the gifts that you put in the plate or the pledge that you put into a capital campaign, but that's how can you help with your investments? How can you think through your whole strategic planning about your budget to increase ministry personally or for your congregation? These are beautiful gifts that when we can help our congregation form these thoughts, they become more generous and loving and wonderfully engaged people. Finally, stewardship is about our relationship. It's about the way that we care with each other. Certainly throughout the pandemic, I have heard about stories, I've witnessed it in my own faith community, I've seen it among my friends, the number of times that we check in with each other, a call just for the sake of it, scheduling a Zoom because sometimes we have to connect face to face, whatever it is that we do to stay in touch with each other as members of a congregation, as friends and as neighbors. This is a really, really important ministry that we give, and it helps us keep in touch with each other and impacts the mission we're able to do. Maybe reaching out to someone is just what they need that day to get through the day. Maybe they're going through something, maybe you know what they're going through and you can help them. So talking with each other, caring for each other, this is a part of stewardship as well. I love praying through my own congregation's prayer list as a daily habit. It is a way that I can remember the names and the faces of people that I love and have worshiped with for more than 20 years. These are people who are a part of my family now. And so taking that time intentionally to pray for the concerns of our church and to pray for each other, this is a part of our work in stewardship as well. It's how we care for each other, how we stay in relationship. Our congregations can use all the tools, social media, thank you notes, text messages, emails, to mark the events in our lives. You know, every year at my birthday, I love seeing the Facebook happy birthday things come in. And then throughout the year, as Facebook reminds me that it's such and such's birthday, and I think, oh, I don't have time to type out 2 words to them. I remember what it means to me to hear that or see that every year. And so I'm like, you know what, I can do that. If we do this in our churches and we all have Facebook pages and we can wish each other happy birthday or happy anniversary or remember a certain event in our lives, these are the ways that throughout the year, not just at the time of an event, but throughout the year, we can keep our community focused and strong. This has been so important during our socially distanced time in the pandemic, finding new ways to use technology to stay in touch. When we can't meet for coffee or have lunch with people, the good old telephone always works as well if you can get someone to answer it. So please find those ways to stay in touch with each other. Wonder if we have any questions, or I see some things that folks have typed into the Q&A about our relational mission impact works. Before we get into the next section, I wonder if there are.
For you, Davey.
Yep.
So Jeffrey asked early on, how do we get parish leadership over the hesitancy of talking about, let alone asking for money? That's a question from Jeff in the Q&A.
Oh, there we go. And Matthew, step in anytime and help answer this question. You know, for as much as we rely on money in church, and we have to fund our ministries. This is a really important part of our work. We are so hesitant to talk about money. One of the reasons is because we have a cultural value that says it's bad to talk about money and faith, or that religion and money don't mix. And I remind people that Jesus talked about money a whole lot. In fact, 16 of the 42 parables are about money or possessions. That's 40%. That's a lot. That's a lot of time that Jesus spent in his 3 years talking about our material possessions, our attachments, the ways that they're good and bad for us, or using them as a metaphor. Just as our society puts so much stuff on money, Jesus entered that world of metaphor and money and used it in the parables. So if Jesus can spend 40% of his teaching using money as a metaphor, what does that say about what we can do in our own congregations? So, okay, it's easy to say that, well, Jesus spent all this time talking about it. Why can't you? Well, why can't we? Because it's awkward, because it's hard, because money is deeply personal, because we attach values that aren't just about our net worth to our money. We attach our security, our fears, our hopes to money. And so to that, I say, what beautiful conversations to have with each other, our siblings, our Christian siblings, because when you're talking about money, you're having pastoral conversations with each other. And that's not just a conversation that your priest can have with you. It's a conversation you can have with each other about where you really are in life and what's going on and what impacts you. Those are a couple of things that I think about when I think about that hesitancy. Matthew, what are some of the things that you use in your ministry?
If I was thinking about this for a second, and I realized that in some ways the word money can sometimes be problematic. And I sometimes reframe this and think that I want to engage people on questions of generosity and enthusiasm. And money can often come up as a part of that conversation. There's a different attitude to stewardship in England and America, and I had to make a bit of a transition in terms of being a rector, asking for people to contribute to the life of the community. Once I started sitting down with some of the generous donors in my parish, I realized that what I was having was a meaningful conversation with the most excited people about the life of the church in my community. And that they followed that with their donations. And what they really wanted to do was to have an excited conversation about the mission of the parish, where we're going. And they were ready for me to start talking about generosity and money when we got to it. And I realized, oh, I'm not asking people for money and it's really difficult and awkward. I'm having a fantastic meal with some of the most excited people about the life of the community I'm in. And they are already generous and they already want to contribute to this, but we just need to talk about exactly how that can be most helpfully put together. I also want to underline what Davey said, which is that conversations about money can also be pastoral. And you need to have some pastoral sensitivity. Sometimes somebody's struggling with money, and it's good to notice that and acknowledge it and reflect pastoral advice or with people about what they're struggling with money. And in other ways, money can be about the life of generosity and enthusiasm, I think. And if I enter the conversation about money from that perspective, I find it easier to have the conversation than if I've got to raise money for the bottom line. There's also this little concept of, do we have enough in life? And I don't know who wrote the idea, but this idea of scarcity thinking versus abundance thinking. I like to think that there's enough in the world for everybody, but we just haven't quite organized it well enough yet. There is enough in our communities of generosity, enthusiasm, and energy, and sometimes that translates into money. We just have to find it and properly articulate how it all joins together. And I think if we just focus on money and the bottom line, then sometimes we back ourselves into a corner where it's difficult to discuss it. If we think about some of these concepts that Davey's introducing, and I'm going to talk about in the next section, developing a practicity, it helps us to think differently about the question of money. Sorry, I went on a bit there.
You went on wonderfully. Thank you, Matthew.
You're welcome. There was another question in the chat. Davey, shall I ask it now?
Let's do it.
How do we engage people beyond the bottom line, beyond the need to survive as an establishment?
Oh.
I mean, I think that's the background of what we're saying and what we're about to say right now. So is that a good introduction to go on to the next section, or do you want to say something specific about that, Davey?
No, it's a great introduction. I see we have a hand up too, so I want to get to that, and then we'll move to that lovely transition. Let's see, Bob, I need to allow you to talk. Let me see how to do that. I feel like I'm allowing you to talk. Can you say anything? Bob, are you muted still? Bob, maybe you could type your question into the Q&A. I'm sorry, I can't quite get you into the conversation. There we go, Bob. Bob, you're muted if you wanted to say something.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. That was strictly an error on
Okay.
pushing an arrow. I was trying to push the Q&A arrow. Sorry.
Got it. Okay, well, thanks for being here.
At least now you know how to unmute somebody.
I do. I have to find out how to mute you again. All right, Matthew, I think we'll move on to the next section.
Great. So I'm going to talk about growing generosity, a skill that needs to be cultivated. And we're going to look at some slides about developing a practice of gratitude, the power of positive thinking and random acts. But here's a Bible verse for you to think about. It's every generous act and every perfect gift comes from above, which is really an attitude of mind that we're inviting you to adopt as a practice. I love the tree in the image, and one of the things that makes me most full of joy is walking in creation with my dog, looking up into the trees and developing a moment each day to stop, pause, and think about the wonder of creation and the gifts that I'm given. It helps me to refocus my thinking away from the daily list of activities that I have to do, and makes me think about my own creativity, my own place in God's creation, and also other people and how they've impacted me. So thank you. Shall we jump to the next slide? Gratitude, a daily habit. I want to say that gratitude as a daily habit has increasingly become a part of my daily prayer life. We have the praying hands on the slide. And it wasn't always. Sometimes I think of like my daily prayer practice in the past as being like drudgery, and I have to get onto my prayers and do them. But I've increasingly become delighted by the idea of walking in nature, saying my prayers, walking with my dog, and realizing that I'm grateful for the world. It means for a while I get to put aside my to-do list, set it down, set it aside, and really focus on what's just beautiful around me. Yesterday, I have to say I had a tough day. I had a difficult conversation about the ministry to the unhoused in our city in the morning. Then I went to a memorial service for 31 members of the unhoused community that had died of COVID, where bells were rung and candles lit in their names. And I was just exhausted with just all of that. But I decided to take a slow route home, walked, saw the trees, looked at the sun coming through the winter trees, and reconnected with my sense of gratitude that I'm able to have this conversation, that I'm able to be there for these people, even though it was a heavy morning. And so I wonder if you have a practice of taking a time out from your regular busy activities and just being grateful for what's going on today. Cell phones can be a wonderful gift for me. I love taking photos when I'm on my walk. I love seeing the sun breaking through the trees and just taking a photo. And then I wind up integrating that into my life. I use those photos in ministry. I show them to people. I use them as the basis for meditations. I also like having a phone on me when some church activity is going on. I like to take a snap of what's happening. I've got photos this week from the first few services in which people have been back in the cathedral after the coronavirus. In our county, we're now able to have a limited number of people in worship. I took photos of the congregation. I took photos of the open door of the cathedral because it's been closed for so long. I like taking those photos and capturing them. And I'm trying to teach other people in my community to take photos of activities that are going on. Your cell phone can be a wonderful gift because it's got that great camera in it. And then we integrate those photos into emails, into conversations. And I also just text them to people. I text them to people and try and say, look, this thing happened and I was thinking of you, or this happened and you were in that photo and I'm grateful to you for the presence that you had in the community at this time. I'm really grateful for all that you are doing for the community. I'm grateful that we were able to open the doors. When you see somebody doing something nice or good, thank them for it. Not personally, but on behalf of humanity. When I'm in my morning walk, sometimes names pop into my head. And I used to think that the name popping into my head was just for me to pray about them. It was often because I'd heard a story about them the day before, that they were struggling with something or that they'd done something that occurred to me. I would just like pray for them for a second and then let it go. I've now added another practice because I have a cell phone in my pocket. Sometimes if somebody pops into my head, I will say a prayer for them. But if they've done something that I think has been a gift to somebody else, I'll just text them and say, your name popped into my head. I was thinking about you. I'm really grateful for what you did. Thank you. That's just like, it's not like a list or a structured activity. It's just creating space in my day so that I can feel grateful for the sun, for the trees, for my walk, for life. Then people pop into my head and I'm like, I'm just going to thank them. You can supplement that with what I would call caring systems. Having systems like a weekly habit of writing an email to colleagues, employees, family, or friends, thanking them for particular things they did. But it's really great to have a reminder to do that. We have a number of systems at the cathedral, and I'm developing more in which we are trying to make sure that we thank people for their volunteer roles on a regular basis at some point during the year. You can have a system of looking through who's volunteering that given Sunday and perhaps writing them an email or a thank you activity. You can have members of staff. If you have staff, I'm in a cathedral and there's a few more people around, that's nice. You can have members of staff that it's their job to like thank people. We have a Dean's Award every year at the annual meeting. It's an example of an opportunity to thank people. And it makes me think I've got to sit down before the annual meeting and work out who I'm going to thank and why with this particular award. And it has to be something special in the life of the community. But you can have these activities weekly, monthly, annually at different levels. It's interesting, in the last Dean's Awards, I decided to thank people for some unusual things. I thanked a couple for complaining about something in the cathedral's life because they did it prayerfully and thoughtfully. They did like the sandwich complaint thing. They did a compliment, then a complaint, then another compliment. But actually it was really authentic and really genuine. And they thanked me for all the work I was putting in to create a video system in the church so that other people could watch what's going on in the service. I realized that as they were asking for that technical system to be improved, that they were expressing gratitude that I was trying to do it at all in the first place. So I thanked them in my Dean's Award for complaining in a way that I thought was constructive, prayerful, and helpful. I also thanked somebody for saying no to me, because it gave me a clear boundary and I knew exactly what they could do and what they couldn't do. And I felt grateful to them for setting that boundary. And also, as I thanked them very publicly about this, I was sharing my values with the rest of the cathedral. I would like other people in the cathedral to say an enthusiastic yes when you can do something, but if you need to say no, I want you to say a clear no, because I want you to know how much capacity you have and how much you don't have. So I want to accept the gratitude of others towards me. That's the hardest thing.
Isn't it?
It is. I'm English. I deflect compliments time, and I've been trying to learn to stop, because if I want to thank other people, I would like to learn to receive their gratitude and recognize that I'm doing something that benefits, and it begins to create a cycle, a back and forth. I'm grateful to them, they're grateful to me. We are creating not a, we don't have enough to go around attitude. We're creating a, look at all of the gifts people are bringing to this ministry. And I love that. Should we jump to the next slide? Thinking positively. This was a book, wasn't it? Who was the writer of the book? Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale. But it's a concept that's like see our consciousness in our culture. But I love the way that it's put on this slide. Assume goodwill. Sometimes we enter into interactions with people and we just think that they're going to go badly. And if we enter into a conversation in which we think it's going to go badly, like I don't know how to have a conversation about money, therefore I'm nervous, therefore it's not going to be great, then you're going to create potentially a self-fulfilling prophecy that it might not go well. I practice in my prayer life rehearsing conversations in my head. And I sometimes think of the worst case scenario and I sometimes think of the best case scenario, and invariably we wind up somewhere in the middle. But one discipline I've tried to teach myself is to always assume goodwill. Always assume that somebody I'm entering into conversation with wants the best for me, wants the best about the situation that we're discussing, that we might have different perspectives on it, but that they have a positive intention. I don't think anybody ever gets up in the morning wanting to do a bad job. They might be stressed, they might be having a difficult time, they might not do as good a job as they'd like, but nobody gets up in the morning wanting to do a bad job or to negatively impact a situation. They want to do their best. Assume that, and you can often have creative and helpful conversations just on the basis of that assumption. Assume other people are not trying to trip you up either. Assume other people are trying to work with you and are assuming that you have goodwill in a given situation. And you're not always going to get this right. You're not always going to get everything right. You're going to make mistakes. A lesson I'm learning as I have grown older, and I don't know wiser, but maybe a little bit, is not to dwell on the mistakes and hold on to them too much. To acknowledge them, apologize genuinely, correct, and move forward. I like this idea. We should be as generous in forgiving ourselves as we are in forgiving others. Often I found myself much more able to forgive other people than I have been able to forgive myself. And it's a discipline of grace and a spiritual practice that I am learning to forgive myself. So try to banish jaded outlooks. Oh, wow. How do we do that? I think it's by having a prayerful practice of generosity. You know, I'm so busy in the life of the cathedral that I could just be completely immersed in to-do lists and tasks all day. And every single moment is me trying to achieve something or do something. I would not survive at the moment if I were not pausing, stopping, stepping out, reconnecting with myself, reconnecting with God, reconnecting with my sense of gratitude about what's going on, and allowing the toxicity that can build up from overly busyness to kind of dissipate. It's what my prayer life is often for.
Yeah.
I love this idea of giving second chances. I will share a pastoral situation I faced. Somebody was really difficult with me over Christmas. Somebody was really difficult with me about the fact that our cathedral could not regather yet because of the coronavirus. They said some unkind things, I will say. And we talked about it. I gave them space. We had a conversation, and then I disengaged. And then I thought, well, I'm not doing that again because it was too painful. They called me to ask for a coffee last week. And at first I was like, no way, I'm not entering into that difficult conversation again. But then I paused. I had a meditation. I reflected. I took them on a walk with me in my head. I prayed about it, and I thought, no, I'm going to do what I would like to normally do. I'm going to make time for this coffee and make time for them, just prepare for another difficult conversation. The reason they wanted coffee was because they wanted to apologize to me. They were sorry for being difficult at Christmas. They were having a difficult time. They were feeling emotional. They realized I was doing my best. And if I hadn't given them a second chance, I wouldn't have been able to receive that apology. And it was a precious spiritual moment for me. So I want to give people second chances, although I was fully prepared for a difficult conversation on that day. It didn't happen. I had a blessed reconciliation. Thanks, Davey.
Yeah.
Davey, tell me if I'm taking over any given slide.
You're doing a great job. And before we leave this slide, I want to ask a question that maybe some of our participants are wondering. They signed up for a stewardship webinar today, and we are talking about practices that will raise money in congregations. Why are we spending all this time talking about generosity? What's the impact or relationship between generosity and stewardship? And that's a question for you, Matthew.
I love that question. I've had to adjust my approach to asking for money over the years, and I've realized that it's only one part of an overall philosophy of the way that I want to approach church life. I want to be in church life because I love it. I'm excited about it. I enjoy it. Sharing generosity, sharing enthusiasm, sharing excitement with people in the life of the church is the primary thing that we should be doing. And we ask for money in the context of that. We're creating an environment in which we can ask for people to contribute to the life of the church. Like I said at the beginning, when I first started talking directly to major donors in the life of my ministry, I was really afraid to ask them for money. When I started having those conversations, I realized that I was sitting down talking to the most enthusiastic and supportive members of my community. And we would say, do you remember what happened at Easter? And, did you see those photos that we put in the newsletter? Did you remember seeing the kids at All Souls Day when we painted their faces for Dia de los Muertos? Do you remember that? And they were the most enthusiastic and engaged people in the life of the church. And the conversation about money flows from that. So it's like, by the time you get to the conversation about money, it's not like, you know, they're like thinking, oh, we don't have enough.
Right.
It's really a difficult time in the life of the church. You're having the conversation about money from a perspective of Easter was beautiful. The creativity of children is lovely. What the children's ministry is doing is wonderful. That sermon you preached the other day was great. The art on the front of the bulletin that's being produced by the office really makes me smile. Oh, and we need resources to help us with this. Could you prayerfully consider increasing your donation this year by a certain amount? And I used to think that was going to be the terrible part of the conversation. What I find is they love what we're doing. They love the way we're engaging in it. They love the generosity spirit around things. Asking for money becomes much easier at the end of that. And generally, people know how much they have. You might not know yourself. They can say 3 things at the end of that. They can say yes, they can say no, they can say, I'm going to think about it.
Right.
And it's okay. That's an okay set of outcomes for me. More often than not, people say yes more than you think.
Absolutely.
Did that answer the question, Davey?
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Great.
Do we want to go to the next?
Let's move on. Random acts.
Random acts. Oh, I talked about some random acts. My random acts are about carrying my cell phone with me, and when somebody pops into my head, I text them and say, thank you. The other day, I was walking, I told you about my Dean's Awards. You know what? It was really difficult to organize the Dean's Awards this year because of the coronavirus. The place that makes the plaques had closed down. We had to find another place that was open. Nobody was in the cathedral hall in order to receive the Dean's Award. They were all at home on Zoom. So we had to arrange some volunteers to ding dong dash, you know, like ring the doorbell, put the gift on the door and then leave. And they did it in the middle of the annual meeting on Zoom. And I said to people, can you please make sure that you answer your doorbell if it rings in the middle of the webinar that we're doing for the annual meeting, because it's something I want you to pick up. And so we managed to get volunteers to do that. I was so involved in the annual meeting that I didn't even think just how complicated it was for my director of operations to organize all of that. It took 2 weeks before the name of my director of operations popped into my head, and I thought, they did an amazing job getting all those volunteers coordinated, making those plaques, getting it all done. And so just on my walk, I just decided to like send him a text and say, thank you for doing that. He sent me a message back saying, why are you thanking me for doing that? I get paid for that. And I was like, I'm still grateful. You went above and beyond the call of duty. What other things could you do? Pop things in the chat thread about random acts of kindness, small acts that you could do that suggest a sense of generosity. Here's some suggestions. Make an extra pan of lasagna for a sick friend, buy a cup of coffee for the next person in line, or share your pocket change. Are there any other things that you could do to foster a spirit of generosity? And you can pop them. Somebody said it's about building relationships on all levels. I think that was to an earlier comment I made, but if you think of anything, put it in the chat thread. Join a team. If you have some spare time or some spare energy, then join something that's going to add delight, color, or joy to somebody else's life. I cannot tell you how meaningful it was when an artist in the community offered to just build the sets for the pageant in my last parish. He designs characters for EA Sports, like the computer game people, so he could draw things, but also he could think really creatively about how we turn like the outside of the inn to the inside of the inn for the Christmas pageant. And he just designed all of that with his spouse. And it was an amazing gift, and it added delight to the pageant. Coach a team or run a youth event, work for a phone bank. Could you join in with a cause, support a Saturday in the soup kitchen, clean up the neighborhood? Right now, outside the cathedral, there is a vacant lot, and we decided that we wanted to have some outdoor services for Easter because we can have more people and they can sing in the outdoor environment. We're going to have some in the cathedral as well, but some in the vacant lot. The vacant lot is a vacant lot. It's a mess. There are currently volunteers outside. I went and had coffee with them before I joined you. They are right now cleaning up that vacant lot. We are going to rename it Easter Park because we don't think people would like to go to the vacant lot for Easter services. So we've called it Easter Park. It's an unmade space that we're doing our best to make delightful and joyful. One of the sets of volunteers said, I've got palm trees at home. Can I bring some palms and put them into the chain link fence around this park, Easter Park, the vacant lot, to make it look nice for Palm Sunday? And I'm like, yes, please. Just add a moment of delight to this event. So they're literally cleaning up the neighborhood right now. Spread the love. Promote a church event to friends, co-workers, and neighbors. Enthusiasm and energy is a great thing. Is your church doing something that you're excited to share? Is your church doing something just for the delight of it, just for the joy of it? In this middle of COVID, world is dark, things are difficult. Do some things just for the fun of it, and then tell friends. There is a Zoom event going on in my church. I just heard news of a church recently that's decided to do some fundraising activities, but what they're doing is people are offering their skills on Zoom calls to members of the church community and people outside the church community. One of them is a cocktail mixologist, another person cooks, and what you do is you sign up for the Zoom call and somebody is going to teach you how to cook something or make a cocktail. And that's being offered to people inside the church and people outside the church. It's just an event that's designed to make people feel delighted and joyful at this difficult time. So promote those things to people outside, or also just say, my church is really doing some interesting stuff in the middle of this coronavirus. Do you want to come along? Yeah. Here's the Zoom link. Here's the online link. Exactly. Or here's how you get to register for a service. Just ask them, and don't ask them because like, oh, I feel like I need to tell people about God and mission. And it's a difficult subject and I don't want to result in this. I don't have, I feel like I'm being told to and I've got to. I never want to do that. I'm like, we're doing something really exciting. I think you'd love it. Come along. It's fun.
I love that.
It's interesting. Give credit where it's due, I think is really important in spreading the love. Make sure that when somebody does something, you're willing to say out loud to as many people as possible what they did, particularly if it was secret. I had somebody the other day telling me not to thank them in public, and I'm afraid I did not comply with their wish. I thanked them in public. They hadn't asked for they hadn't asked for their donation to be anonymous. It wasn't that. I wouldn't break an anonymous gift. It was just somebody that was being very self-deprecating, and I just said thank you to them.
I love that. Sometimes you just have to.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to the chat thread or question?
Yeah, a couple of questions.
Kindness.
We have a couple of questions, and they're similar. So Eric asked, what about the perception that some parishioners have that the church is always talking about money? And Greg asked a similar question. He also admitted that perhaps it was a jaded outlook. That some people struggle separating stewardship from fundraising. When we talk about generosity and abundance, they link the concepts with fundraising. So how can we make sure that when we use the words generosity, gratitude, abundance, that they're not just synonyms for show us the money? And I think that a lot of the things that we've been talking about in this section, inculcating these acts or these formational exercises and attitudes about generosity help us to extend that same generosity to our fundraising efforts. So we're not always talking about generosity because we want people to shake out their purse into the plate. We're talking about generosity because we want to increase people who increase the capacity of the world. When we give, when we make our impact in communities, we are raising the whole awareness of the mission of the church in our community. That's much more than about fundraising, and it's about fundraising. So when we think about it that way, I think we can really get to that place of we're not just talking about generosity because we need a new word for pledge campaign. We're talking about generosity because we want you to understand that all of the things that you do, your time, all the things we've talked about here are a part of forming you to be a gracious giver.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, Davey, I just want to say, I hope you're not thinking I'm just developing a tactic for asking for money. When I say this is a part of my prayer life, this is a part of my daily practice, I'm not just doing it because I want to ask people for money.
Right.
I'm doing it because it makes my life feel better. It's authentic, it's real, it's genuine. And it also changes my mental attitude when I come to the question of asking people for funds.
Exactly.
People have said in the life of the cathedral, we ask for money too much. And people have also said, we don't ask enough. People have said, we don't ask specifically enough. I think a conversation about money is just that. It's a conversation. We need to say to people, we need this resource for this institution to function and grow, and we have to talk about that. There are times when I talk less about money explicitly, and there are times when I talk more about it. I'm just beginning to develop our summer fundraising ask, which is a part of our own year-round stewardship practice. We're going to be talking about what we need to return to church after the coronavirus in meaningful ways. But I want to talk about it joyfully. But there's been a period of time in which I haven't been making specific asks for a while. Some people are going to say, you're talking too much about money. And I think that's a difficult thing to wrestle with.
It's a difficult thing.
Yeah, but others have said to me, you should have asked for that thing that you needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have given it if I'd have known. And so it's finding a balance that's an important thing. And it's recognizing that the whole thing is an ongoing conversation.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Definitely good stuff. Two more things that came into the Q&A, Matthew.
Yep.
A request that you please send a picture of your Easter park to the group. Maybe you can upload it on our Facebook page after Easter.
Davey, can I share my screen, or is that not possible?
I think you can. Hold on. You're a host, right?
Yeah.
So I think
I'm just like, can I do this? Let me just try sharing screen. This will stop others screen sharing. Do you want to do that? I didn't know if I could do this. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Beautiful.
This is one of my morning gratitude photos. Oh, let me go to the right screen so I can move through it.
That wasn't the vacant lot I was imagining.
No, that wasn't. That's the park this morning, early this morning.
Okay.
This is the cathedral with the doors open for the first time after a year of them being closed. This is me and my cathedral wardens having come to a regathered service.
Yeah.
I took a photo because I want to record that. I take a lot of selfies. People joke about that. This is me on my walk this morning with my dog and praying. This is my daily practice. This is the rose garden in the nearby park where I went to pray this morning. This is the regathered service that we had on Wednesday night with one of my colleagues celebrating the Eucharist. I'm realizing I'm not sure if the photos of this morning's cleanup have uploaded to my laptop. And they're on my cell phone. I'm not sure if I can show you these. Let me have a quick look. I will show you the completed. No, they've not uploaded yet, but I took photos of the volunteers
I believe you.
this morning, working, because I'm going to put them in the e-news next week and show everybody that these people showed up to create the Easter Park that you're all now enjoying. But they've not got to my computer yet. They're still on my laptop, on my iPhone.
Great.
And
Well,
I'll try and get the Easter
send
Park
it out to us later. That would be great. We had one more question, which helps us turn the corner into the next part of our session together. How do we foster stewardship as a year-round spiritual practice and discipline? You have come to the right part of our webinar, and we are about to begin that work now. So thank you, Nancy, for that question. So I want to share with you some practices, and I've separated them out in advanced, intermediate, and beginner things that we can do together. So in a year of generous living, in a year of thinking about things in terms of creating a formation program for every Sunday of the year that talks about our generosity, our gratitude, our abundance, without communicating, without over communicating about money, without people feeling, as Kimberly typed into our chat, nickeled and dimed about our ministries, helping people feel generous and abundant. How can we do that? So we're going to start in reverse order. We're going to talk about the advanced things, and then we're going to talk about some intermediate level things and beginner level things. And I hope that wherever you are on your journey of expressing gratitude and year-round stewardship in your congregation, you'll find some practices here that will work for you. One of the things that we suggest is developing a theme for each month that talks about your journey together through the church year and through your program year of things that you can do to inculcate generosity and abundance in your congregation. So when we create a theme or a plan for the year, it can be things that we hold a single forum, or perhaps it's stuff that goes deep into every level of program. Our Godly Play ministry might do it. Our sermons might talk about it. We could, however deeply you decide to integrate these monthly themes. This is a good way to get in the practice of offering something every month for year-round practices. So I think about it sort of in the first half of the year, where we really talk about some of the big stuff about money, like the power of how we spend and save, or why are we inspired to give it all? Some of those stories that you usually tell during your pledge campaign, like why I donate to St. Swithin's. Well, tell those stories apart from the campaign. Tell those stories when we're not having a specific ask around them. Keep people mindful that the work we're doing is supported all year round. And then as we move in toward the summer, I like to start thinking about getting us ready for fall campaigns. About 90% of our congregations do fall campaigns. And so that's where the bulk of materials go and are thinking about fundraising pledge campaigns. So we want to prepare people for that. One of the ways that we'll talk about a little later is to do a mid-year budget and ministry review. It's not a repeat of your annual meeting in July, but it's more an update for everyone, maybe at a coffee hour or maybe over a Zoom coffee hour, however we do things these days, of being able to check in and say, the ministries that we agreed to support at the beginning of our year or with our pledge campaign, here's where we're at with them. Here's the impact we're having on our community. Also, here's how we're doing in our budget. It's a chance for transparency, a year-to-date budget against the projected. Let's see where we're doing and help people understand if they need to increase or if they're just doing fine. It's a chance for us to readdress that moment of, or that time of looking at our budget and our ministries together. And then as we move into the end of the year, beginning to talk about the other pieces of fundraising in our church, things like our legacy societies or our overall stewardship of the environment, and of course the generosity that we feel as we begin thinking about the Christmas season and the greatest gift that we're given. Those themes can help us create a whole program throughout the year, and you can take these in whatever direction you want, but it helps us to form a year-round thought about it. TENS has a toolkit, and I will put the link, it's here on this page. I'll put the link in our chat later, and I'll email it out to you later. So don't worry if you don't catch it all now. But we have a whole toolkit that was designed for TENS by Bishop Greg Rickel of Olympia and his team a few years ago. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to let you know that it's there. You can download it. Everyone has access to it. What it provides for us is a real way to talk about how to incorporate stewardship formation in each month of the year. It goes deep into program and ministry. And so, as I said, this is our advanced level. This is next level year-round stewardship stuff. It helps you plan your year. So it looks a little like this. And here's a little snapshot of what December and January look like. It takes the liturgical calendar, the themes that come up in each month, and it gives us these different practice areas. Those categories repeat every month. Spirituality, a particular ministry that we'll focus on, something for the treasurer and finance to be thinking about, or some teaching, some environmental act that we can do to remind us that we are stewards of all creation. A reminder to talk about our outreach. Maybe we look at a different section each month and we highlight it. A vestry. So in this case, we spend December thanking the vestry for all of the work that they do all year long. Maybe the next month we pick a different ministry and we focus on them. So what this does is give us a way to spread through our whole program areas, and you'll develop your own categories through all of our program areas, how to be generous and think about our stewardship. If we were to do adult ed or youth education activities around these themes, if we were to pick our liturgical actions around some of these themes, if we put this deep into our DNA as we create our program, we are subtly reinforcing the message that everything we do is about our stewardship, our relationship, our generosity, and our abundance practices. This is a really important tool, and I know that it's a lot. You're looking at this and you're thinking, well, this would take like every committee getting on board with it. Every one of us would have to support this work. And this is a part of the way that we recommend that congregations that want to go deep into stewardship formation take a look at it. It's not just enough to do a sermon every once in a while or to put something in your bulletin. When you really want to focus on year-round stewardship, it's got to go through all of your program areas. That said, we're going to cover some other things that are not that are simple, that don't go into this amount of detail, because something is better than nothing. Yeah, Matthew.
So I was just going to say, also recognize this is scalable. Depending how much capacity you have, depending on the number of people you have working in various committees or not. If you're just working in a family-sized parish and it's just you, it's possible to do this in a scalable manner. So just the idea of year-round stewardship is just to think, what can I do each month? Maybe it's just an article in the e-news or an article in the parish magazine, and that's all I can do in the first year. You will find, though, that as you start to do something like that, other people might catch on, and it might grow over a number of years into a bigger set of programs. I completely agree with Davey. This is a way of diving in deep, but the whole thing's scalable. You can start small if you just begin to think about doing something every month.
Absolutely. Matthew, I'm going to bring it to you now to talk about some of the liturgical practices we can do. This is our intermediate steps. Every Episcopalian, or many of us who are liturgically minded, know the church calendar really well. And so will you guide us through some ways that we can incorporate it into our liturgy?
Yes. I wanted to say, in terms of what you just saw Davey presenting on, it feels like, oh, is this a massive add-on program? And I want to say, not necessarily, because we are already expending an awful lot of energy in putting together our liturgical calendar. We are already doing these things, and these themes going through the year are already embedded in the life of our church. It's just, here is a request to look at Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter, and Pentecost through the lens of generosity and stewardship, potentially, and say, is there something that we could do in this season that takes us back to this core theme of generosity and the idea of stewardship practice? So in Advent, we are looking at the world about to change, something about to happen, a child is about to be born, and we can focus on gratitude in the midst of that for all we've received and communicate our hope for justice and peace. The word gratitude is in there, and it's an important part of our mission and our purpose to long for justice, and Advent is a time in which we can think about prophecy and the prophetic desire for justice in the world, and the coming child who will bring peace. Christmas, the greatest gifts are the ones that we give to each other through our faithful generosity and abundant love. Christmas is often about giving, and there might be a way of talking about giving to the ministry of the church. But also, even if you don't get to the question of specific giving, talking about generosity, talking about God's giving of himself to us in the person of his Son. Epiphany, we focus on how we are Christ's body in the world as we manifest God in our lives, families, and work. The Epiphany season is about how we see the life of God working in the person of Jesus, but how might we also manifest the life of God in the world in our own lives. Lent, dust to dust, is a powerful reminder that life is finite and comes to an end, and plan giving is something that could be discussed at that point. I feel like this could feel like a tender subject for us to discuss. I have to say, surprised recently at the beginning of the season of Lent in our annual meeting, I articulated a vision for the vacant lot behind the cathedral, that we want to build something on it in the fullness of time, and some changes in plans. I had somebody write to me the very next day saying that they were super excited about that idea, thought it should have been done for years, and could they put the cathedral in their will in order to help build that project? And I'm like, of course you can, yes. So then I had to do some work and some research with our stewardship team on trying to figure out a way to make that possible. Sometimes people are ready to talk about the gifts that they want to give to the cathedral or to your institution at the ends of their lives. And so that can be an essential part of faith-based fundraising and giving. Easter, our faith and our works are alive, just as Jesus lives, renewed with joy and refreshed by the waters of baptism. We can't help but shout alleluias to a world longing for love. I think Easter, we are an Easter people. Easter is one of the greatest times of the year. I'm trying to think creatively about Easter this year as we're coming out of the dark of a year of coronavirus and thinking about how we build off the back of this experience, the concept of new life into everything we're doing. And so that's a key element of my stewardship plan for the summer. Pentecost, our faith scatters us in all directions as we bring healing, feeding, comfort, teaching, faith, and love to a hungry world. I also really think that in this season of Pentecost and the year coming up, we've been isolated from each other. And we've been asking, I think, for God to come alongside us and each other, and God comes alongside us in the person of the Spirit. But we're also going to be able to talk about ministries of coming alongside one another in the year to come and continuing to support each other as we come out of this period of coronavirus.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has any questions or thoughts about that. I also would love if anybody wanted to write in the chat or in the question box any ways in which they think the liturgical themes of the year could speak about either generosity as a concept or stewardship specifically.
Great. And while they're writing those,
Sure.
we'll move into some of our feasts, and we can highlight those as opportunities as well.
So stewardship themes and activities of the liturgical calendar continuing. In addition to the seasons of the church year, there are great feasts and fasts. These are good times to talk about stewardship. Use these conversations and topics in small groups. The Epiphany. What is the star that guides you in how that guides you in your ministry? How does it inform your giving? I like the idea of these kind of challenging questions that you could ask at a particular season of the year or a particular feast. The presentation of Christ in the temple, sometimes known as Candlemas, which is my favorite festival, I think outside Easter and Christmas, when you lift your eyes to glimpse the future of the church, when Simeon looks into the face of the child and sees salvation in the face of the child in the temple. It's so poetic. I love it. What do you see when you lift your eyes to glimpse the future of the church? And on Ash Wednesday, a question you could ask is, if you had to give up everything you had, would you still find yourself rich? What does richness mean to you? Rogation days, what's the commitment to the earth? How does your stewardship for God's greatest gift to us inform our generosity? Ascension, what gifts does your church need to prepare itself for future generations, to serve your neighbors? Transfiguration, my church that I used to serve used to be called Transfiguration. It's still called Transfiguration. If we truly saw the face of Jesus in each other, how would we treat our neighbors? The Transfiguration is about seeing the face of Jesus transformed. It's about seeing the holy in the everyday. How would we treat our neighbors if we saw them as holy? If we saw them as Jesus on earth? How can we provide for their needs? All Saints Day, what are the lessons about giving and generosity that we have learned from the saints in your life? And I think that's an incredibly rich theme. If we expand just from the named saints in the church to people who have been examples of faith in all of our lives, what have we learned from them? Your patronal festival, the name day of your church. Who are the people who left legacies and planned gifts to your church? What will your legacy be? I led a stewardship campaign in my last parish in which we said the founders of our church gave us this building on this hillside for the purpose of our worship. What would we do if we were going to emulate their generosity today? And people really responded strongly. We got photos from the original founding and groundbreaking, and then we did another groundbreaking for the new building work that we were about to do, reminiscent of those photos. It was really funny looking at the 1950s clergy in black and white all doing that, and then we were in full color with me, the senior warden, and we got some children wearing like little plastic fake building hats to like start digging into the ground and do another groundbreaking. And those photos sat side by side and were really moving.
Yeah.
I think we did it on Transfiguration Sunday, which was the name day of the church. Are there things that people have said in the chat?
There are a few things, Matthew, that people have typed in. Someone reminds us that Pentecost, the gifts of the Spirit, is a good time to have a ministry fair to focus on our gifts of time and talent. And that's a great opportunity. It's usually also nice weather, so you can set up tables outside, invite people, let people know that there's lots of ministry opportunity. I love that. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea. Catherine reminds us that fall is a good time to talk about the generosity of the harvest. Certainly, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, the liturgical calendar is built around that theme, and we can think about that. It's a beautiful time to think about where we've come and the harvest that we are about. Nancy reminds us that Rogation Days, we can process around the church. I always love churches that do rogation processions. It's so much fun. The neighbors are always looking at you like, what are those crazy people doing now? But there we are. We're processing. We're talking about the gardens or the earth, or reminding people that that we're here and we're doing stuff outside the walls of the church. And another note about All Saints, and I know that we have at least one participant on our call today who's from the Moravian tradition. And it's about who are the saints in your life and what did they teach us? This idea about All Saints Day. I attended recently, or a little while ago now, a funeral, a Moravian funeral. And one of the things that is a part of that tradition that I found so amazingly inspiring is that they offer not just a will and testament about their possessions, but they offer a legacy or a will of their values, things that they want to, wisdom that they've collected, experiences that they've collected, that they want to pass on to the people that are a part of their family or their community. And it was very personal, lessons to specific people about events and moments. And it was like, the person who had just passed was sharing his experiences and wisdom, a collected life of experiences and love. It was a beautiful idea about what do we learn from those who have gone before us in terms of generosity. What do we want them to remember? Beautiful ideas.
Maybe,
Yeah.
so can I comment on Carol S's comment in
Yeah.
the chat thread? I love your emphasis on the enthusiasm and positivity. We sometimes get bogged down in conversations with longtime members in a negative outlook for the future of the church. There is an awful lot to be unpacked and have a whole webinar all of its own on that. But I appreciate Carol's comment, and I wanted to say it's something that we haven't got in the slides at the moment, but I think we should be answering some of the questions that people are asking in the life of our community, and we should be building our mission. Sometimes we get hung up with maintaining the institution that has existed throughout the history of the church.
Yeah.
And it needs to grow and evolve. We need to go where the generosity is leading us, where the energy is leading us. One of the things that I've had to do at some points is to recognize that certain ministries are coming to an end. And one thing that we can do around that, which I think is also a part of the spirit of generosity, grieving them and loving them as they draw to a close and letting them come to a close, but grieving them in such a way that we give thanks for all that people have given in the past in a particular area of church life. And grief, in my mind, often really energy in a new direction. And so one thing that we are really wrestling with in our cathedral at the moment is the ministry of coffee hour. It's been struggling. And in the middle of coronavirus, we aren't allowed to hold it. So we kind of held a little moment of kind of a memorial for it with the committee that was organizing coffee hour. And we are acknowledging that what it was has come to an end, and what it will be is not yet clear. And we are working on that as a way of releasing new energy for new direction. Sorry, that was my answer to Carol's
That was
comment.
a beautiful answer. Thank you.
Takes us off point slightly, but I can get back on point.
Well,
Davey.
and here's your opportunity. We've got 6 minutes left. So
Oh my goodness. Okay.
can you take us home?
Generosity is a skill. Generosity is a skill that is cultivated, formed through teaching, practice, and time. Here's a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Like humility, generosity comes from seeing that everything we have and everything we accomplish comes from God's grace and God's love for us. Certainly, it is from experiencing this generosity of God and the generosity of those in our life that we learn gratitude and to be generous to others. We're trying to say that this idea of the theology of generosity is not just a technique for fundraising. It's a way of life. It's a way of being that can create a different context for conversation about money, but it has to be genuine and go deep for it to be authentic.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Davey.
So we've talked about some advanced things, some intermediate things about the liturgical calendar, and we're now moving into things that you can implement if you've never done this before. If you're a beginner at year-round stewardship, try these 4 things to keep your conversation on stewardship and generosity alive in your congregation this year. One of them is offer a book study. And I have 2 books to recommend, both of which I love because they have one of the best features in a book, I think, which is that you can read them really quickly and get a whole lot of learning from them. Henry Nouwen's A Spirituality of Fundraising is probably one of the best short tools on the theology of fundraising. It takes about 20 minutes to read through. It's in large type. There's a workbook that goes along with it. You can find it very inexpensively on Amazon. It's a really good book for a book study to help that spirit of generosity be learned in your congregation. And we also have Charles Clowen's 1 Minute Stewardship, Creative Ways to Talk About Money in Church. This is a really great tool to help you do some quick study about stewardship formation. I spoke about this earlier. Conduct a mid-year budget and mission review to review and report on the ministry objectives and impact. So this is not a recreation of your annual campaign, but a real chance halfway through the year to talk about what you're doing and how it's impacting your community. Do some storytelling. So I've given you a story here or a question that you might ask in some small group work that you might do throughout the year. Get people really talking. This is a vulnerable question, right? So you might want to do it in a small group that's been meeting for some time, or find a question that promotes this kind of sharing, deep sharing about our views on money and generosity, and have members of the congregation be talking about this with each other. It's a really beautiful and easy tip. Finally, preach a stewardship sermon that has nothing to do with the campaign. It doesn't end with, and someone will be talking with you after the service about your pledge. It's just a beautiful sermon on the stewardship, on the concepts of stewardship. As I've indicated, Jesus spent 40% of his parables teaching about money and stuff and using the metaphor of our stuff. And so I bet you can find a gospel that has something to do with stewardship and preach on it, and preach about generosity and preach on abundance. We have some tools on the TENS website in our resource library about preaching on stewardship, and it'll help you if you're looking for reasons or ideas on that. We have a comment from one of our faithful members in the Diocese of Los Angeles, who for the 2nd year in a row has written a hymn for TENS members to use, which focuses, I know it's a hymn, and this year it's in English and in Spanish, and it's posted on our website, and you can have a little track, you can hear how the melody goes. It's a great little thing to insert into your liturgy to help maybe your choir can lead people through it if you're doing virtual choir. It's a really great tool on emphasizing why we give and how we give it. Stephen, you are a gift to the church. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions that we can answer before we end? And I know we are like right at a minute to go, but is there anything else that you'd like us to cover before we send you back to your Saturdays?
Just got to thank you in the chat thread for the best treatment of steward. That's really nice. Best treatment of stewardship I've ever experienced. It feels like a spiritual retreat, and we're glad. And thank you for this. I'll be sharing with a missionary and deanery. That's from Diane and Christine.
Thank you so much. Affirmation is beautiful. A couple more questions I'm seeing. We will be posting this, so if you registered, and you did because you're here, we will send out an email to everyone with the links. And we'll also post it on our website. It'll take us about a day to get everything together and post it up, but you'll be able to access this. Please share it with your stewardship committees, your vestries, your friends and neighbors. We want everyone to benefit from this. That's why we give you both the video and the slides, so in English and in Spanish, so that people can follow along. We really want this material to get out there. I don't see any more questions. I do appreciate all the beautiful affirmation and thanks. So I appreciate that. Diane, you asked if we'll repeat this session. We may throughout the year. I'm going to email you all out a survey link. And if you really want to see this happen again, please emphasize that in the survey, and we will make sure that this gets back on the calendar. I really appreciate that. Matthew, I appreciate you also. I appreciate you spending your time with me.
I appreciate you.
It's really nice to see you on my screen and to be with you today. Friends, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for contributing to the chat, asking your questions. That really helps us know how we can focus on this. I really hope that you'll implement some year-round stewardship this year. If you need any help, please email me. I would love to talk with you about this, give you some suggestions. I can zoom into a vestry or a stewardship committee meeting, give you a pep talk if you want. I love talking about this stuff, so call on us. We are here for you. Thank you, friends, and thank you, Matthew. I'm going to end this screen sharing, and I'm going to end our webinar today. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.